The sky above Drakenfor was turning dark. Thick clouds of dust covered the sun as enemy ships moved in like shadows. The people in the city of Velron had already stopped counting the number of warships. Every hour, more ships entered orbit. No, help had come. None was expected. In the control center, deep underground, Commander Threx stared at the large display. Red dots covered the screen. Each red dot meant an enemy ship. There were too many. Their defenses were weak now. Their power systems were breaking down. Supplies were running out, and no one had answered their distress call. Children were hiding. In the lower chambers, their mothers trying to keep them calm. Fathers, uncles, and brothers were on the surface, some guarding old defense turrets, some just standing still, knowing there was nothing left to do. No one spoke of hope anymore. It had died a few days ago. They had sent a final signal yesterday. It was a short message. "We are unarmed. Civilians present. Please, anyone, help us." No one replied. The Galactic Union, once trusted by the Draken, people had gone silent. The Union had promised protection, but when the enemy fleet came, no ship arrived. Their leaders were probably already negotiating with the enemy, choosing to save their core planets and sacrifice Drakenfor. A small boy named Rill sat next to his grandfather, an old Draken named Yarrow. Rill asked in a low voice, "Grandpa, will the humans come?" Yarrow did not answer at first. He looked at the ceiling as if trying to see beyond it. "Humans?" he finally said. "They left these stars a long time ago. No one has seen them in years. But the stories say they're monsters," Rill whispered. "They say if you cry for help, they hear it, even from far away." Yarrow smiled sadly. "Maybe. Or maybe we're just telling stories to make the fear go away." Above the planet, the enemy fleet prepared for the final move. General Varlex, a cold-blooded leader from the Gorthak Empire, gave the order to begin the bombardment. "Target all surface cities. Destroy everything. Leave the mines untouched." His officers obeyed. They did not fear retaliation. The Draken had no weapon strong enough. Their allies had abandoned them. It would be over soon. A strange silence filled the air. On the surface, everything stood still. Birds stopped flying. The wind disappeared. Even the insects seemed to go quiet. Then, a strange pulse hit the atmosphere. It was soft, almost unnoticed. A few soldiers looked up at the sky. Nothing was there, just the clouds and the enemy ships. But then one of the radar operators shouted, "Commander, there's a signal. It's small. No ID. Just a blink." Commander Threx frowned. "Show me." The screen showed a flash, just a small point, far out near the edge of the system. It had blinked once, then vanished. "Could be a glitch," the technician said. "Or a probe," another replied. "No," Threx said slowly. "A probe doesn't blink like that, not with that energy pattern." They watched the screen for several more minutes. Nothing happened. Then the signal blinked again. Closer this time. It was impossible. Everyone knew that nothing could move that fast. Not even a Union stealth ship. Threx whispered, "What is that?" In space, General Varlex's fleet was moving into attack position. They had lined up 5 battleships to target Velron first. As they prepared to fire, something strange happened. The lead ship systems went down just like that. No warning, lights off, shields gone, engines cold. Then another ship lost power. Then another. Varlex shouted, "What is this? Is it sabotage?" His engineers had no answers. Outside, a faint shape appeared for a moment. Just for a second. It was too far to see clearly, but it was large. Bigger than any ship in the Gorthak fleet. Then it vanished again. Back on the planet, the radar screens started blinking uncontrollably. Signals came in from different frequencies. Some were too old to be used. Some were encrypted in codes no one had seen in decades. One technician screamed, "These are human codes. These are Earth military frequencies." Threx stood still. "That's not possible. Earth military hasn't broadcasted in over 30 years. But these codes, they're real, and they're moving closer." All across the underground base, the power systems started lighting up again. Screens turned on. Broken communication, links reconnected. One word appeared on every screen, received. People gasped. Many thought it was a trick, a virus, but the codes were too advanced. Then a voice, calm, deep, and emotionless, spoke through every speaker on the base. "This is Warship Hammerfall. Humanity responds." There was silence. Someone whispered, "It's real." On the enemy ships, panic started to grow. Varlex ordered all ships to form a shield wall, but the power failures kept spreading. One ship after another went dark. Some started spinning out of control. They fired missiles into space at random, hoping to hit whatever was coming. The missiles exploded before reaching anything. Hammerfall was now close enough to be seen. It did not look like any other ship. Its shape kept shifting as if the light around it didn't understand how to reflect properly. It had no markings, no visible engines, and no windows. Just a dark, silent shape in the stars. One enemy officer screamed, "That's not a ship, that's a ghost." Varlex shouted, "Fire everything!" They launched hundreds of weapons, missiles, lasers, plasma bolts. The sky lit up with color. Nothing touched the Hammerfall. Then it moved. No sound, no flash. Just movement that didn't follow any known rules, and then 5 Gorthak warships disappeared. Not exploded, not broken. Just gone. Sensors could not explain it. On the ground, children looked up at the sky as it shimmered with distant light. The people of Velron slowly stepped outside, their eyes wide. Yarrow stood with his grandson and whispered, "It came." Threx could barely breathe. He whispered to himself, "They sent a warship, a human warship." Then another message appeared on every screen. "We will clear the sky." The story was real. Humanity had not vanished. They had gone silent, watching, waiting, and now they had answered. The people of Drakenfor, who had given up all hope, looked to the sky and saw something they never thought possible, a savior that defied reason, a ghost from the past, a machine with power beyond understanding. They were not alone anymore. And the enemy, they had no idea what was coming next. The darkness above Drakenfor had not changed, but everything else had. Fear still gripped the people, but now something stronger was rising, something forgotten, something that felt like hope. In the sky, where enemy ships had once floated confidently, there was silence. The warships of the Gorthak fleet hovered, still, unsure, watching for a shape they didn't understand. It had appeared and disappeared like a dream, yet 5 of their strongest ships were simply gone. No wreckage, no explosion, just silence as if those ships had never existed. In the enemy command ship, General Varlex paced in growing frustration. He had never faced this kind of problem. Their weapons were ready, their shields were up, their fleet was strong, but something was out there, something that ignored all their tools of war. The screens showed nothing. The scans returned empty. No heat, no signal. The only thing they had was the voice. "This is Warship Hammerfall. Humanity responds." The message still echoed in Varlex's ears. He had heard stories of humans before, old stories. Most said they had vanished. Some believed they had destroyed themselves. Others said they had left this galaxy behind because they saw no challenge left here. Now one of their ships had returned, and it did not speak with anger or pride. It spoke with calm control, like it knew exactly what it was doing, and like everything happening was part of a plan already written long ago. On the surface of Drakenfor, Commander Threx stood at the top of a ruined building staring at the stars. He could see a few enemy ships moving slowly in the sky, like they were afraid to make noise. It was strange. A fleet that had come to destroy them now looked nervous. And all because of a ship that had not even fired a visible weapon. Threx looked down at the people gathered in the city's central square. Hundreds had come out from hiding. Mothers still held their children close, and some cried quietly, not from fear, but from something else. Something warm. Something they hadn't felt in days. The boy, Rill, stood with his grandfather, eyes fixed on the stars. Do you think it's still up there? Rill asked. Yarrow nodded slowly. It's watching, waiting, just like a shadow. But why doesn't it just stop the enemy now? Because it doesn't need to rush, Yarrow said. The enemy is already afraid. Above them, on the Gorthak command ship, the officers argued in low voices. It's only one ship, one said. Even if it is human, we still have numbers. But nothing we shot touched it, and our sensors can't find it. It could be a trick. Or it could be something worse. Varlek silenced them all with a wave of his hand. It's trying to scare us. That's all. Humans love their little tricks. We hold position. We scan everything. It will show itself again. As if in response, the lights on their ship flickered. Not off, just down. Just enough to feel like something was wrong. Then a strange pulse hit the ship. Not from outside, but from within, like the air itself was shifting. One officer clutched his head. I can hear something, a sound, but not sound, a rhythm. Everyone went silent. Then, from deep space, a signal came through. No image, just a voice. Calm, cold, unshaken. You are trespassing. It was not angry. It was not loud. But it carried weight. As if the voice alone could break through metal. On the ground, every screen lit up at once. In homes, bunkers, and shelters, the same words appeared. Protective field initialized. Civilian priority confirmed. In the next second, the sky changed. A dome of light spread across Velron, glowing softly above the buildings. People looked up and gasped. The light was not bright, but it felt powerful, like it could hold back anything. And then, for just a moment, they saw it. A shape in the sky. Not close, not far, just there. It hovered between the clouds and the stars, blacker than the night. Edges that didn't stay still. It moved without moving, like it was waiting to be noticed but not fully seen. Some said it had no engines. Some said it had too many. It didn't fire, it didn't speak. But the enemy ships began to drift. One by one, they started pulling away, slowly at first, then faster. They changed formation, unsure what to do. They weren't retreating yet, but they were no longer attacking. Inside the Hammerfall, no crew spoke. It had no crew. It didn't need one. Hammerfall was one of the last of its kind, built not to be flown but to think, to wait for the right time, to act when no one else could. It had not moved for years. It had not spoken for decades. Until now, it had received a signal, a final cry from a broken world. And that was enough. On Drakenfo, the people were still, watching, waiting. A child touched the glowing shield that now covered the city. It didn't burn. It didn't buzz, but it felt warm, like a hand placed gently on a shoulder. The enemy didn't understand what was happening. They had come with full strength. They had been ready to win. But now, they waited too, scared to move. In the control room of the Hammerfall, lights moved in perfect rhythm. No alarms, no sounds, just patterns. It was thinking. One enemy ship tried to scan it. The scan failed. Then the scanner exploded. Another ship tried to launch a drone. The drone never moved. Its systems simply stopped. Hammerfall didn't need to fire. It just needed to exist. And in that silence, a message appeared again. This is not your space. Leave now. General Varlex clenched his fists. He couldn't believe what was happening. One ship, only one, had turned his army into a frozen fleet. And he didn't even know what kind of weapons it carried. But deep down, even he knew the truth. This wasn't a war anymore. This was something else. And the rules were no longer his. On Drakenfo, people stood in silence, looking up, breathing slowly, waiting for the shadow to move again. Because now, they believed, and hope had returned. The stars above Drakenfo shimmered faintly, as if they too were holding their breath. Time felt slower now, stretched thin by the silence in space and the deep, strange calm covering the city. No one on the surface spoke loudly. Even the children played quietly. Something had changed in the air, something invisible but powerful. It wasn't fear anymore. It was awe. The shape in the sky hadn't moved. It was still there, hidden in shadows and clouds, yet always just visible enough to remind everyone that it hadn't left. The warship didn't speak again. It didn't need to. Its presence alone kept the enemy ships drifting without purpose, caught between orders and uncertainty. At the edge of the city, in an old watchtower that hadn't been used in years, Commander Threx watched the sky through a rusted scope. He didn't trust machines anymore, not after what the enemy had done to their networks. But the scope was real, made of glass and metal, untouched by code. It showed him what his eyes already believed, but couldn't explain. The enemy's fleet had paused. Not completely. They still moved. But their movements were no longer confident. They circled slowly, like predators unsure if the shadow above was sleeping or simply waiting. Every hour that passed only made them more uncertain. "Are they leaving?" asked Sergeant Kell, stepping beside Threx. "No," Threx answered quietly. "Not yet. But they're thinking about it. They're not used to doubt." Sergeant Kell looked up too. "Can one ship really hold them off?" Threx didn't answer. He wasn't sure anyone truly knew what that ship could do. But deep inside, he felt something strange. A sense that Hammerfall hadn't even begun. That everything so far had been a warning, calm, quiet, and patient. Far below the surface, inside the city's emergency control room, Counselor Mara sat with her hands clasped tightly together. She had stayed through the invasion. She had chosen not to leave with the others when the last transport escaped. And now, after all that fear and waiting, she found herself unable to speak. She was watching the live data from the shield. It still pulsed gently, untouched by the enemy. Every attempt to break it had failed. The dome felt more like a living thing than a wall. It didn't resist. It simply didn't allow anything in. "Do you think they'll test it again?" asked her assistant. Mara stared at the numbers. "No, I think they're too afraid it might push back." The assistant blinked. "Push back?" Mara nodded. "Not with force. Just with understanding. Whatever built that shield, it knows more than we do. It listens, it protects." Above the city, the stars blinked slowly. On the command ship of the Gorthak fleet, General Varlex watched the silent warship through his own scope. His hands were steady, but his heart was heavy. He had studied hundreds of military strategies. He had fought in 17 campaigns across 7 systems. He had faced resistance, rebellion, and fear. But never this. Never silence that spoke, louder than any weapon. He leaned forward and whispered to himself, "What are you waiting for?" The shadow didn't answer. But something else began to change. Lights across the Gorthak ships flickered. First one, then 2, then a dozen. Quiet ripples of interference began to move through their systems. Not destructive, just present. A presence, soft and invisible, moving gently through circuits and code, like a breeze across tall grass. Engineers scrambled to fix it. They found no errors, no intrusions. Everything seemed normal, but still different, like someone had touched their systems without touching them. Then the stars around the shadow began to shift. Not the ship. The stars, or so it seemed. A distortion, faint and slow, rippled outward in perfect circles. It wasn't heat. It wasn't energy. It was something else, like space itself was breathing. Every Gorthak sensor failed to describe it. There were no warnings, no dangers, but every officer felt it in their bones. Something old. Something vast. Watching. Back on the ground, in a quiet square in the heart of Velron, a group of children gathered around a street performer who had returned from hiding. He played a soft tune on a small stringed instrument. The music floated, gently in the warm air rising toward the sky. One of the children, a girl named Saley, looked up at the glowing shield and said softly, "I think the sky is listening." Her older brother chuckled. "Skies don't listen." "But this one does," she whispered. "I can feel it." In a hidden room deep within the Hammerfall, things were moving, but not with gears or engines. No hands touched them. The systems were self-aware, but not conscious. They didn't think in words or emotions. They followed deeper patterns, ancient codes designed not to destroy but to protect. Hammerfall was not made to fight like other ships. It was made to end battles before they began. It had waited for the right signal, a call that had to be earned, not sent. A cry of true desperation. A moment when no one else would come. And now, its purpose had returned. On the enemy command ship, General Varlex received a signal. No voice, just a simple phrase. On the screen, ask your people if they wish to stay. Varlex stared at it. No threat, no warning, just a question. His officers began to whisper again. Doubt, once small, was now growing quickly. Some asked if they should respond. Others asked if it was a trick. But deep inside, even the bravest knew what that question meant. This was not about power anymore. This was about permission, and whether or not they still had it. As the night deepened over Draken 4, the people didn't sleep. They stood together, on rooftops, in doorways, along streets and walkways. They looked up, not with fear, but with wonder. Something incredible was happening, and they didn't want to miss it. The stars twinkled gently. The shadow stayed still, and the silence filled with meaning continued. Because sometimes the most powerful force is not what strikes first, but what waits with strength that doesn't need to be seen. Night had settled over Draken 4 like a soft blanket. Yet the world, beneath the stars, buzzed with a strange energy. The city was quiet, but not asleep. Every light, every shadow held the breath of waiting. The warship known as Hammerfall remained cloaked in mystery, an unseen guardian watching over the people like a silent sentinel. Commander Threx stood at the edge of the city once again. His eyes scanned the dark horizon where the enemy fleet still lingered in a cautious dance. The Gorthak ships had not attacked for days, but their presence was a heavy weight in the sky, like a storm threatening to break yet holding back. Threx rubbed his chin thoughtfully. The human ship had not moved. It had not fired a single shot. Yet the enemy's fleet was unsettled, their confidence shaken by a force they couldn't see or understand. It was as if the Hammerfall was a ghost, a shadow that could touch, without being touched. Commander, a voice whispered behind him. Threx turned to see Lieutenant Kara, her face pale but determined. We've received another message. Threx's eyes narrowed. From the ship? Kara nodded. Yes, it's short, but clear. Threx stepped forward as she handed him the datapad. The message read, Peace requires choice. Prepare to decide. The cuck. Words hung heavy in the cold night air. There was no threat, no demand, only a call to choose. Inside the enemy fleet, General Varlex frowned deeply. He stared at the message flashing on his control panel. He had spent years commanding armies, breaking sieges, and winning battles. But this message was unlike anything he had faced before. It was a challenge to his will, not his weapons. What do they want from us? One officer asked nervously. Varlex's voice was low but firm. They want us to think, but they are the enemy, another replied. Why offer peace? Varlex's eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. Because sometimes the strongest power lies not in destruction, but in mercy. We must decide if we accept it. Back on Draken 4, the people gathered quietly. Rumors spread fast about the message. Some hoped for peace, others feared it was a trick. The city's council held an emergency meeting. Councillor Mara stood before the assembly, her voice calm but strong. This is the moment we prayed for. A choice has been given, not just to our enemies but to us as well. We must be ready. The crowd murmured in agreement. Children clung to their parents, and the old whispered prayers for guidance. Meanwhile, deep inside Hammerfall, the ship's systems hummed with life. It had waited for this moment, a moment when both sides could step back from the edge. The warship was not just metal and circuits. It was a creation of human hope, intelligence, and patience. It was designed to protect, yes, but also to heal wounds that weapons never could. Lieutenant Kara returned to Threx's side. What do you think it means? Prepare to decide? Threx's jaw tightened. I think it means the war is over, if we choose it to be. But it also means the hardest part is yet to come. Days passed slowly. The Gorthak fleet held position but made no move. The shimmering dome still protected Velron and its people. The city began to breathe again, a cautious relief settling over the once frightened faces. One evening, as twilight faded into stars, a meeting took place high above the city in a secure bunker. Representatives from Drekenfie's council and their remaining military leaders gathered around a large table. Commander Threx and Councillor Mara sat side by side. We must answer, Mara said quietly. But how? And what if it's a trap? Threx looked out the small window, where the shadow of Hammerfall was just barely visible against the night sky. If we do not answer, the enemy will make their own decision, and it might not be one we want. Suddenly, the room's communication device beeped. The message was from the Hammerfall again. The choice is yours. Speak for your people. The room fell silent. Each person felt the weight of history pressing down on them. Outside, a breeze stirred the leaves, carrying whispers of hope and fear. In the days that followed, envoys were chosen from both sides. They would meet under the shimmering dome, the space between war and peace, shadow and light. The enemy leaders approached with caution, their weapons sheathed, but their eyes sharp. The people of Drakenfur watched from a distance, holding their breath. As the talks began, it became clear that both sides had scars deeper than any battle wounds. They spoke of loss, fear, and dreams for a future without endless fighting. The Hammerfall hovered silently above, a reminder that the true power was not in violence, but in the courage to choose peace. Time passed slowly, but with each conversation, the walls of suspicion crumbled a little. Commander Threx, once a warrior ready for battle, found himself listening more than commanding. Councillor Mira saw tears in hardened eyes and hope where none had been before. Above all, the people learned that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with weapons, but with words and trust. The shadow in the sky had done more than protect them. It had given them a chance to change their fate. And as the first light of dawn touched the city, a quiet promise was made. Not of war, but of a future waiting to be built together. The city of Velron woke to a soft light filtering through the high clouds, the kind of morning that promised change without shouting it aloud. The air was cooler than before, filled with a calm that felt both fragile and new. People moved through the streets cautiously hopeful, their eyes drawn upward where the warship still hung like a silent guardian watching over them all. Commander Threx stood atop the tallest tower, his silhouette outlined by the pale dawn. He had spent sleepless nights pacing the halls of command, wrestling with the weight of decisions that were not his alone to make. The message they had sent, the choice to peace, had echoed through the enemy ranks, stirring confusion and something else, curiosity. On the enemy side, General Varlex paced in his command chamber. The halls that once buzzed with orders now hummed with quiet discussions. The question of peace had unsettled many, forcing them to rethink what they believed about strength and victory. Varlex was no stranger to hard choices, but this one tested him differently. Back on Drekenfur, a new mission was being planned. It was not a mission of attack or defense, but of understanding. Envoys from both sides would meet under the shield's protection to explore the possibility of a future without conflict. Threx had volunteered to lead the human delegation, knowing that words now carried the power once held by weapons. The day of the meeting arrived with a sky painted in shades of gold and violet. The two delegations faced each other beneath the shimmering dome, a symbol of protection and fragile hope. Eyes met with a mix of caution and wonder, recognizing in one another the same desire to survive and thrive. Councillor Mara stepped forward, her voice steady. We come not as enemies, but as fellow travelers seeking a path forward. A Gorthak leader, tall and with eyes like molten metal, nodded slowly. Our battles have left us scarred, Perhaps it is time to heal those wounds. The conversations began carefully, each side sharing stories of loss and courage. The envoys spoke of their people's hopes, fears, and dreams, revealing a shared humanity beneath the armor of war. Outside, the Hammerfall hovered silently, a watchful presence that seemed to listen and learn. Its advanced systems absorbed the signals of peace as if they were new life entering its core. As hours passed, a breakthrough came when a young diplomat from the Gorthak side spoke of a dream, a galaxy where species learned from one another instead of fighting. The idea was met with surprise and growing agreement. In the quiet moments between talks, Commander Threx walked among the people of Velran. Children played in the streets, their laughter light and free. Traders reopened their stalls, exchanging goods and stories with cautious smiles. The city felt like it was waking from a long nightmare. Yet beneath the calm, questions remained. Could trust grow where fear had ruled? Could old wounds truly heal? That night Threx sat alone under the stars, watching the warship's lights blink gently. He thought about the future, uncertain, fragile, but possible. He remembered the words of Counselor Mera. Peace requires courage, not just to say yes, but to forgive and to build. Across the city, the people dreamed of a day when warships would no longer hover as threats, but as symbols of protection and hope. And in that quiet, shared hope, the first seeds of a new beginning took root. A future where humanity and its neighbors might finally write a story not of conflict but of unity. The warship remained in the sky, not as a weapon but as a promise that even after the darkest nights, dawn could come. The sun rose slowly over Dreckenfor, casting long shadows that stretched across the recovering city. The morning light was soft but full of promise, as if the world itself was waking up from a deep sleep. For the people of Velran, this day was unlike any other they had known. A day where hope was no longer a fragile thing whispered in secret, but a steady flame burning bright in their hearts. Commander Threx stood at the city's edge, watching the horizon where the warship Hammerfall still hovered like a silent guardian. Its hull gleamed softly in the early light, a symbol not just of power but of something far greater, trust earned through patience, courage, and understanding. The weeks since the peace talks under the shimmering dome had been both challenging and healing. Old fears remained, but they were met with new determination. The enemy fleet, once poised for battle, had withdrawn slowly, their ships moving with care and respect for the fragile new truce. It was a dance of balance where every move counted and every word mattered. Inside the city, life was returning to its rhythms. Markets buzzed softly with cautious trade. Children laughed as they played in open squares. Songs of hope and survival filled the air. Yet beneath the surface, the leaders of both sides knew the real work was just beginning. Counselor Mera met with Commander Threx in the command center, their faces lined with the exhaustion of long days and sleepless nights. "We have a chance," she said quietly, "but it will not come easily." Threx nodded. "Trust does not grow overnight. It takes time, patience, and the willingness to forgive." Outside their window, the first envoy ships from the Gorthak fleet landed, bringing representatives eager to build a future together. The city's gates opened slowly, welcoming those who once stood as foes now as partners. The peace was not merely the absence of conflict. It was the presence of hope, the beginning of a new chapter written in kindness and respect. As the day wore on, Threx visited the city's memorial, where names of those lost in the conflict were etched in stone. He knelt, placing a hand gently on the cold surface. "We honor them," he whispered, "by choosing a better way." From the memorial, he looked up to the sky where Hammerfall still waited, ready to protect, not to destroy. Later, under the vast stars, a gathering took place in the heart of Velran. Humans and Gorthak shared stories, food, and laughter. They spoke of their cultures, their hopes, and the promise of peace. Young and old alike listened as a child from the city asked a Gorthak elder, "What do you see when you look at the stars?" The elder smiled softly. "I see endless possibilities, a future where we are not enemies, but neighbors. The warship, once a symbol of power and fear, now stood as a beacon of unity, a reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity could rise, not through force, but through understanding. As the night deepened, Commander Threx gazed upward. The stars above Drakenfur seemed to shine brighter, as if the universe itself celebrated the fragile peace they had won. In that moment, he knew their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, doubts to face, wounds to heal, but also a future filled with promise. The silent warship had arrived like a phantom, changing the course of history without firing a single shot. And now, its greatest mission had begun, not to fight but to inspire, to remind all who lived beneath the stars that hope was the strongest force of all.